Hello, I'm Spencer Ullman. I am the owner of the Toronto Mockingjays. Today, Mitchell has asked us to do a podcast of sorts to talk about our team and where we think our team's going, how we were out of the draft, and so on and so forth. Coming out of the draft, I had the number one overall pick this season, and I picked Mike Trout, like most people would have picked. Um, but the rest of my team did not pan out after that. Looking back on it now, I had Devin Mesoraco, who is out for the year and has been out for majority of the season with a hip injury. I had Chris Davis, Ian Kinsler, David Wright, Alexi Ramirez, Brett Laurie, Brandon Belt, Trout, Christian Yelich, Starling Marte, Kenys Vargas, and Lonnie Chisenhall in my starting lineup. I also had Denard Span, Rajay Davis, John Jaso, and Anthony Rendon, who still has been on the DL for probably three-fourths of the season. My starting pitching, I had David Price, Jordan Zimmerman, Anibal Sanchez, Nathan Eovaldi, John Lackey, and Kyle Loesch, along with Steve Cishek of the Marlins as my relief pitcher. Uh, yeah, so looking back on it now, my team was pretty bad. Uh, to this time from then, I only have 6 people left over from the draft, and Christian Yelich is kind of grandfathered into that because I dropped him for a while and then picked him back up 2 weeks ago. I've made 67 roster moves to get to this point where we are in the season, and I am now finally starting to get confident in my fantasy baseball team. The largest hole in my lineup and my team was probably my pitching staff, just because after Price and Zimmerman, I didn't really have anybody at that point who I was confident in that was going to have a good season. We've all seen Kyle Loesch and his pretty poor pitching this season. John Lackey, he had a 4.5 ERA since coming to the Cardinals last season. I use a website called Fantasy Assistant, which ranks our teams by stats of players, our full roster, and our starting lineups. And at one point, during week 2 or 3, I dropped to 12th, which is dead last in our 12-team league. So at that point, I made the decision to trade Mike Trout. I traded Mike Trout and Starling Marte for Paul Goldschmidt, Buster Posey, and Lance Lynn, and I have since flipped Buster Posey for Jake Arrieta. But now I am currently ranked third behind Papa Smurf Tribe, which is ran by Mitchell Martinson, and St. Cloud Scotties, who is run by Andy Russell. Uh, Makes me pretty excited for the rest of the season because, well, Papa Smurf Tribe is my rival, and I need to chase him down. So the first 5 matchups of the year started out in division play, and I played my rival twice. My rival was Mitchell Martinson, Papa Smurf Tribe, and I went 1-1 against him the first 5 weeks of the season. And one of those games came with my highest score of the season at that point, which was 281-point effort, led by David Price's 2-start week total of 49 points. And my offense scored 152 by the recent acquisition of Paul Goldschmidt, who scored 32 for me that week. I also played Jiminy Cricket probably twice during this stretch, and I scored a putrid 107 points versus him, and my pitching staff scored a total of minus 4 points. It started with a minus 25-point performance from Jordan Zimmerman, and continued with a minus 24-point performance from Anibal Sanchez on the Saturday before the matchup was over. So that kind of hurts. I started the season 2-4 against my division, which kind of hurts your chances of having a good place in the standing when you get behind so quickly. Uh, Papa Smurf Tribe is 9-4, and Jiminy Crickets is 10-3 at this point. And I'm 5 games back in the division, 4 games back on my rival, but I am surprisingly only 1 spot out of the wild card. So looking forward to pushing my way into the playoffs and hopefully being a threat. Through the first half of the season, I'm 5-8, And split it in half. I'm 2-4 through the first quarter of that, and 3-4 through the second quarter of it, and going strong in the matchup I'm having right now with 50 Cent Pitchers, which is run by Alex Stanek. I've got a few pitchers left. Looking forward to the end of that matchup. I'm one game out of the wild card after beating Digging Out Fiorite last week, which is run by Alex Swenson. Top performer of the first half for my team, Paul Goldschmidt. He leads batters in scoring with 346 points. And as I mentioned earlier, I got him in a trade from Hamilton's Coke dealer for Mike Trout and Starling Marte. And David Price, my top pitcher, he's got 304 points, and he is the number 9 pitcher this season, 89 points behind NL Cy Young favorite Max Scherzer. Top pickup this season was Glenn Perkins. He is the number 3 relief pitcher at 233 points, tied with Mark Melancon of the Pirates for 28 saves on the season. One of the biggest disappointments for me this season, Anthony Rendon. He's been on the DL all year, and he was in that MVP race last season and finished, I believe, 3rd in voting last year. So hard to see him not contribute to the Nationals or my team. One of the biggest surprises is Glenn Perkins wasn't on a team. I picked him up off the waiver wire, and he's one of the best relief pitchers in the game right now. My division, it is the Hannibal Lesters, Jiminy Crickets, and the Papa Smurf Tribe, along with my Toronto Mockingjays. Garrett, who runs Jiminy Cricket, leads the division at 10-3, putting me 5 back, as I mentioned earlier. Mitchell, my rival, is up 4 games on me at 9-4, who I am 1-2 against this year and have 2 more matchups with. The last 4 weeks in the division, my team has been putting up points, but still only has a 500 record. I'm 2-2, whereas Papa Smurf Tribe's 4-0, Jiminy Crickets are 3-1, and the Hannibal Lesters are 1-3. Over the last 4 weeks, though, I'm averaging 278 points per matchup. Overall, throughout the season, I've averaged 233. I'm outscoring the rest of my division by a good chunk right now. Star players for my team right now have to be Paul Goldschmidt and Chris Davis on offense. And some slump players right now, Chris Carter, who's hitting 190 and probably won't be on the team much longer unless he turns it around, and Ian Kinsler, who's coming off a career year in Detroit and hitting only about 260 this. Mitchell wanted us to give suggestions for the league. I'd say keep the same amount of playoff teams. It's nice to not have to worry about inactive teams towards the end of the season, because unless you had a really poor stretch, almost everybody has a chance, especially at this point of the season. We've been talking about keepers lately, and I would say go for it. Maybe 2 or 3 players per year that we do for the keeper league. It's probably the closest to being an owner and GM that you could of like a major league team to the atmosphere of it. The cool thing is that if we were to do keepers, the teams that don't do well one year, they could trade a draft pick for a good player to help them the next season. And it's kind of cool to say, oh, I've had a star player like Bryce Harper for the last 3 years that's been helping my team win. Whereas now it's, I've had Bryce Harper, I've had Max Scherzer, or I've had Miguel Cabrera carrying my team. I think it'd be a way to get into fantasy baseball even a little more. Mitchell and I have been talking under 500 teams. That's the one problem with our playoff system, where a team under 500 could get a wild card spot. And yeah, that happens in leagues. I think it's really just a problem with teams haven't been strong for most of the season, and now teams are starting to pick it up. I don't think we'll have that, but it's still not a good look for the league, even though we're not like the NFL or anything like that. We're a fantasy baseball league. But it's never fun to have a under 500 team make the playoffs. And then one more suggestion: we have a Facebook page, and I've heard that people are kind of upset when they offer trade and nobody looks at it. So maybe post a message through the Facebook page saying, "Hey, I offered so and so a trade. Check it out." And then, because everybody checks Facebook, not everybody checks fantasy baseball every day. So, thanks for listening, and good luck the rest of the season.